Diana Levine, thanks for joining us today. How important is it in terms of divorce within the Jewish context to get your get, as your website suggests?
It's absolutely vital for any Jewish couple because it's perfectly possible for people to have the civil divorce, but unless they've also got their get, they could create problems for themselves and also possibly for future generations down the line. So when the couple get married, there is a dual religious ceremony, and so it just follows that there should be a dual civil and religious divorce.
And if they go to see the right lawyer, I mean not necessarily you, but anyone who's well versed in this procedure, then it needn't be angst-ridden. It can actually avoid huge amounts of difficulty in the future.
In an ideal world, that's exactly what would happen. The tragedy is that, unfortunately, in my experience, or rather reproducing the experiences of some people that I know, the solicitors aren't always aware of this law and how they can assist.
How much of a failing is that, do you think, on the part of lawyers, that they haven't made sure that they're up to speed on this subject?
It's the same as any other piece of legislation. If a solicitor is advising a client, that solicitor has a professional need, it's a professional requirement that he or she should be aware of the legislation, and technically it could be regarded as professional negligence as in any other situation if they don't know about it.
Are you aware of any instances like that where you as a fellow lawyer would say, well, that colleague, if they'd been a colleague of mine, I think would have been in jeopardy of professional misconduct or negligence?
Yes, I am aware of some cases where this has happened because individuals, I don't know the lawyers concerned, but certainly individuals have told me that their solicitor did not raise the issue of the get with them, and it's something that ought to have been done. I have been aware for quite a number of years of the problems, and that solicitors have been in a position to help and advise rather more rigorously than they have. And in fact, it was that knowledge that led a colleague of mine and myself actually to write, well, initially it was actually an article for solicitors, and it was published in the Law Society's Gazette, which went out to all solicitors in the land, so there was really no excuse. But of course, you're not going to get all solicitors in the land to read it, and you're not going to get all solicitors dealing with family law, and in particular the small number, and it is a small number, of solicitors who are going to actually, read that article. However, we are aware that it has been of use because we've had excellent feedback. And then after the article was published, we decided, because our audience for the article was actually the legal profession, because of the law. We then turned our attention to the individual that needs a divorce. And so we addressed that as well, and that's how we came to have this ebook called Getting Your Get at the website www.gettingyourget.co.uk.
There is a huge human aspect to this issue. What's been your experience of the kind of tragedies, I think you've used that word yourself in some of your articles, that have occurred when things don't go the way they should?
There was one incident when I was in synagogue after the service. A couple whom I simply didn't know approached me, but they'd heard of me, and they told me their very sad story. Very sad, as you say, tragic. What happened was this: the woman had her civil divorce, and then she remarried. I mean, this is quite some years ago we're talking about, before this legislation came in. She remarried somebody, another man. In fact, this was now her husband. And there was no problem with that civilly, absolutely none. But religiously, what it had led to was she then went on to have children, 3 children, and I don't know whether you're familiar with the word Manza. Perhaps I could briefly explain it.
Yeah, please do.
It's the equivalent of a quote, a bastard or illegitimate child in Jewish law. It's actually different from the civil law understanding of the word. It happens when a woman has her civil divorce and she then goes on, she's already had her Jewish marriage. She and her husband are both Jewish, but she then goes on to remarry without having the Jewish divorce, the get. In that situation, when she has any further children, and of course this could be whether or not she actually enters into a further civil marriage, it could be a partner, and those children are then stamped forever.
And their children, I think.
Yes, indeed, and their children. It goes on, it just never ends.
One can only imagine the state of mind if someone is religious and is confronted with that kind of choice or that kind of stamp. It must be absolutely devastating.
Yes, it is devastating. First of all, it was devastating to that couple because they actually weren't aware of the consequences, and that is a tragedy in itself, that it was just their ignorance of the Jewish law which led to this situation. And we weren't able to take the conversation further because there's absolutely nothing anybody could do, and she was aware of that. There is another situation which I encountered in the sense that I was told about this because I didn't meet the individuals involved. Sometimes, you know, people are brought up in a non-religious environment or a traditional environment, Jewishly, culturally, in whatever way, but without actually being observant as such. But sometimes they change, they decide to become more observant. And this particular incident took place when there was a young boy who he had decided to become, he found it very interesting and he wanted to study more and learn more. And so he went to a yeshiva, which is a Jewish, it's like a Jewish secondary school and more and beyond. And it came to the age and stage. Very often what happens is nobody actually arranges or forces a marriage, but there is an arrangement whereby someone will suggest a particular individual, and so this young boy, I mean, he was in his early 20s by then, which is not an uncommon age for people to have these introductions, and if they find the introduction is one that suits them, they decide to take it further, become engaged and married. So he became engaged after an introduction, after some time, to a young girl, and as part of the process of getting married, Jewishly, he has to show that he's Jewish and that he's eligible to marry. So he got the papers from his mother, who had not actually informed him that she did not have a get from her previous Jewish husband. Now that made him a mamzer. He was devastated. He was absolutely devastated. It's not to say that he's not regarded as Jewish, it's just who he can marry that's the problem. And then anybody else that he marries, any further children that he and his wife were to have, would be tainted with that damning status.